Hey everybody, this is Vo, the President and CEO of the San Francisco Bay Area Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I have the pleasure of being joined here today by Miss Mary Knox. She's Contra Costa County's Deputy District Attorney, and we're here to learn a little bit more about her campaign platform that I'm sure you guys have all have seen out there in full force as we head into the primary elections. So welcome, Mary.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity.
We're very excited to have you here sharing your platform with our audience, and what we're primarily interested in is learning all about you, who you are, why you're running, and what the core pillars are of your campaign platform. What are you trying to accomplish? Can you tell us?
Initially, I'm trying to restore professionalism and integrity to the District Attorney's Office, restore public safety, start protecting the rights of crime victims, and hold people who choose to commit crimes accountable.
Fantastic. So why did you decide to run, and can you kind of take us back to the early points in your career? Give us sort of the high level and what brought you here today.
Okay. Well, I've been in the DA's office for 37 years, my entire career, prosecuting crime. I've prosecuted some of the most complex cases in California's history and convicted some of our most notorious criminals. I've just felt like it's been an honor to serve the public of Contra Costa County. And over the past 4 years, I've watched that all become dismantled with the current failed policies of the current DA that's attracting criminals to Contra Costa. In the past, it had always been criminals avoided coming to Contra Costa to commit crimes, and that has all changed.
So there's a prevailing metric out there that's published by the, I believe it's the Federal Reserve, and they have some kind of data showing that the trend has been going down, and it kind of eventually comes to like an all-time low in 2020. What's going on with that, and what's maybe behind some of this crime that people are reportedly seeing?
I'm not sure how the Federal Reserve actually calculates their statistics. They're not a governmental agency that is basically tasked with keeping those statistics. The FBI is, and that's contrary to the FBI's conclusions. And it's also contrary to the statistics that are actually being kept in Contra Costa County. For example, in Walnut Creek, in January of 2022, violent crime increased over January of 2021 30%, and property crimes increased 19%. So however they keep their statistics, I'm not really sure, but I know that the crime statistics within Contra Costa, definitely the violent and property crimes have increased.
So from your vantage point, what are the authoritative sources that we have to keep tabs on this progress that we're making?
I believe that if everyone, and it's all accessible on different police agencies' websites. For example, here is Walnut Creek PD's crime statistics, and this is what gets reported to the Department of Justice and the FBI. So they're required by law to keep these statistics according to certain defined rules, and also the classifications of different types of crimes, so that the law enforcement reporting is all consistent. So people can go to Walnut Creek, Concord, Antioch, and you can see for yourselves exactly what the crime statistics are doing in Contra Costa.
So bottom line, is crime up or down?
Crime is up.
Okay, so obviously you have a lot of ideas for how to resolve that, right? And coming from the DA's office, can you tell us about some of the key approaches that you want to take in the DA's office, within, of course, the scope of what you can actually affect change in? That there's clearly, all kinds of impact that we can drive outside, and wish we could drive, beyond the scope of what our, sphere of influence is. But what specifically about the DA's office is within your reach if you were district attorney?
So my first day in office, I will rescind the policies of the current DA that allow people to steal $300 in merchandise and waltz out the door with it, and not even have misdemeanor charges filed against them. It's having a huge impact on our local businesses, and frankly, particularly, adversely impacted by the pandemic, and then this massive amount of merchandise loss is not sustainable. So that's the current DA's policy. It's not state law, so that policy will be rescinded. The current DA also has a policy that requires us, it was actually put into place the Monday after the 2020 looting of Walnut Creek and Pleasant Hill, which require us to consider whether or not the looters needed what they stole, which is an essential misunderstanding of the fact that this looting is being organized by a criminal syndicate of organized retail thieves. Armloads of jackets no one needs, but they're getting sold on, now we have a very thriving black market on the internet with all of this stolen merchandise. So that looting policy would be rescinded. And also that I would advance policies within the office that had DAs take intelligent looks at whether or not someone should be retained in custody. We have, for example, when I was doing the felony filing, there was a defendant who had a really unusual first name. So I kept noticing cases were coming in on him. So I couldn't get a case filed fast enough before I got a second case. And he was rolling carts loaded full of power tools out of Home Depot. I was really surprised to learn that you can fit $3,500 worth of power tools in a Home Depot cart. But so I rounded up 15 felony cases on him, filed them all, and it was during the pandemic when property crimes, they were literally zero bail. So I filed a motion to set bail to keep him in custody to stop this recidivism, and a judge was very happy to sign it. So we just frankly need to get back to the very simple task. The job of the DA is to enforce our laws. The police can arrest people all day long, but if the DA is not filing charges, the message is sent that there are absolutely no consequences for this crime.
Okay, so we jumped right in here. We're multi-threading now. We have a lot of things to unpack there. So first of all, okay, so let's say we capture everybody. We have to, pay for what we do with them once we do that, right? So I want to come back to that. There were clearly, televised reports of the looting that went on. And so we saw how there was actually kind of like a lack of police response in general, because all you saw were the looting. You didn't see any officers chasing after anyone. So now, has there been a precedent set that maybe created that? And what went through a lot of people's minds is there some type of agenda behind the way that the police responded? And so that was very curious. So there's I guess the other you also alluded to this, which reminded me of something about a policy that's enforced that is in essence somehow tasking officers with making assessments at the time of arrest on whether the object that was stolen was needed or not. And there's a criteria that is now kind of being seen as sort of a layer of requirements that go into the arrest process. So I know there's a lot going on here. I said we're multi-threading now, so you can kind of take any one of those in the order you want.
So with regard to the looting in downtown Walnut Creek, and that day, it was not just Walnut Creek that was looted. It was also Pleasant Hill, the Best Buy at near we used to call it the Dome Theater when I was growing up. It's no longer there anymore, but so that Best Buy was also looted, as well as some businesses like Verizon, cell phone stores in Pleasant Hill. So there were hundreds of looters that descended on Walnut Creek, and frequently these organized retail thieves, they're armed. So, for example, a woman who was running out of Neiman Marcus with armloads of Jimmy Choos, a carload of gang members pulled in from San Francisco. They wanted the shoes. She wouldn't let them go, and they shot her in the arm. So it's Walnut Creek PD was completely overwhelmed. So it's do they completely outnumbered dive in and start trying to make arrests and then have this whole thing turn deadly? So I wasn't part of the decision-making process related to that, but I worked with Walnut Creek PD in 2020. It was very labor-intensive. We had to do cell phone tower dumps to get phone numbers, to write search warrants for subscriber information, and it was very complex. So I'm very familiar with how that all went down. But there were, literally people with so much merchandise in their arms, running back to their cars that they left running in the parking garages, so that they could make their quick escape. But they're dropping things as they're running. They have so much in their arms. So it's the looting is one issue, and the law enforcement response, they learned within a day of what happened in Walnut Creek. The veranda this was all over social media. The veranda was coming next, but Concord PD responded to that. And since the veranda is it can be a very hard target since they're just those two turns into the shopping center. So with enough police presence there, they averted the looting. Danville was next, but Danville PD worked with the store owners in Danville to board up the businesses. Jewelry stores moved their merchandise off-site. And then the Sheriff's Office SWAT team was on standby in case people got through the barricades that were put up in downtown Danville. So part of my plan to combat the organized retail theft is our law enforcement. They participate in mutual aid training together. And so we already have the platform in place that when we can utilize our DA, FBI Safe Streets Task Force. They have really impressive technological capabilities. So when the chatter starts on social media about organized retail theft, then working together, they can, for example, shut down downtown Walnut Creek. Put enough police presence down there to protect the businesses. But Walnut Creek PD can't do it themselves. It's going to take mutual aid regionally here in the county to address it.
Okay, fantastic. So now we spoke about some of the challenges that the officers have with, let's say, the arrest process and this criteria that is now part of that procedure.
And also one of the real challenges for the police is the retailers now know that charges aren't being filed. And so frequently they're not even taking their employees' time to call the police anymore to file police reports. And so it's I think between the retailers becoming so discouraged about how this proliferation of retail theft has been allowed to just blossom out of control, then the police officers, if they make an arrest, they're filling out the booking paperwork at Martinez Detention Facility, and the person they just arrested is walking right out the door. So we need to have a meaningful bail system in place and some accountability, and there needs to be an effective response from the DA's office to make this all work.
So are we sort of now kind of caught in sort of like a downward spiral here with policy and, let's say, the way that the response from law enforcement is reacting to that, to those policies, which are kind of making the situation worse? Is that generally what's happening?
Yes, and I know this is getting further down into the weeds, but the current DA's policy is that we do not file charges on the possession of less than 3 grams of controlled substances. And that includes fentanyl, that includes rock cocaine, tar heroin, very addictive substances. And in the past, 3 grams, and I know it's hard to really be able to understand these quantities, but that was potentially a sales weight. 3.8 grams is what a mid-level dealer sells. It used to be called an 8-ball. It's an eighth of an ounce. And those drug dealers were known in the trade as ballers. We're not even talking about someone who's selling on the street corners. This is somebody who's in their car, usually with a gun, delivering to the street dealers. So everyone has seen the proliferation of homelessness, and drugs and the homelessness, that goes hand in hand. And people still have to buy the drugs. So a lot of this retail theft relates back to getting the money, selling the goods to fences and getting the money to buy their drugs. So it's all one big interrelated fabric that we need to basically stitch back together to keep our communities safe and our businesses prosperous and healthy, and allow business owners to recover from the pandemic and prosper.
So those thresholds seem to be kind of alarming to me, at least, considering the LD50 on narcotics and what it would take to, let's say, kill somebody 50% of the time with X dose. Do these thresholds kind of is there like a certain number of people that this threshold would kill? Let's say if we were to base it on the LD50 levels.
So my understanding, and I've been through training on fentanyl with the DEA, is that 3 grains of fentanyl can kill you. And for example, under the current DA, with a man was arrested with 266 pills of fentanyl and a loaded firearm. He was allowed to, and that's a state prison qualifying crime. He was allowed to plead. Basically, the charges were reduced to misdemeanors, and he was placed on diversion.
So all told, this seems kind of like a pretty large amount of people, considering you said like 3 grains.
3 grains.
And so, how many grains are in this amount that is not being prosecuted?
I couldn't even begin to do the math for you. So, if you think about 3 grains of salt versus even a single gram of something.
So technically here we're talking maybe like thousands of people killed, and with the amount that is currently not exceeding that threshold to where it can be prosecuted.
The potential, yes, certainly. And when you think about how much, and again, this gets down in the weeds, but how much like a heroin addict who is using tar heroin, 3 grams is a huge amount of tar heroin. So it's what concerns me the most about this is the fact that people who are addicts, in order for them to be successful in drug treatment, they're going to fail out, 3, 4, 5 times. So not having any court control over a diversion, which allows them in court-ordered drug treatment, then once they successfully complete that, the charges are dismissed. So the whole thing goes away, but we need to have, it's an essential misunderstanding of the nature of addiction to expect that an addict who, their lives have fallen apart because that addiction is so strong, that they're just voluntarily going to walk into drug treatment. Plus, they don't have the ability to pay for it. So court-ordered drug treatment, no one pays for, and it has the structure to it to actually be successful.
So your approach in general is let's prosecute the crimes, and then maybe on the polar opposite side of that, there might be an extreme where we want to kind of heal society and kind of do it from the ground up. And so, how do you reconcile these two approaches? It seems like they both have quite a bit of merit. On one hand, we're talking people, and then on the other hand, we're talking the law, right? And so it seems like they're both sort of approaching some kind of middle ground. And so when we, let's say, talk about one of these extremes, let's say the side that you're supporting, I'm going to call it an extreme just for sake of, let's say, juxtaposing, right, the two, contrasting sharply these two sides. So now what we're looking at here is maybe an approach where we lock them all up if they break the law, which sounds, well, it's written in the law, it's a letter of the law, so that's kind of what the prescription is, right? You get locked up, break the law, get locked up. So now clearly that's going to drive some kind of changes elsewhere in, let's say, prison industry, and just the where does the funding for all that come? And I know the prison industry is kind of privatized to some extent, but at the county level and such, do we have that kind of capacity to basically absorb the swell up of let's say new convictions, and can you talk maybe about the courts and what we might expect if, let's say, suddenly we woke up and your world was the was the norm, and now everyone's at work. What does that look like?
So this actually would be a return to what we've always been, effective law enforcement in Contra Costa County. And crazily, despite our effective law enforcement, we have always had one of the lowest state prison commitment rates in the state. So we have lots of resources available locally to put people on probation, to put them into programs. We have our West County detention facility that was built, I'm going to say a decade ago. We have plenty of space for local housing of people either awaiting trial or people who've been sentenced to, they call it now county prison, instead of sending them on to state prison. So that was something created by Proposition 47. So we have all of that in place, the foundation for that in place. And I've been involved in gang prosecution since 2006, but frankly before that I was assigned to a federal grant position here in the county, the Major Vendor Narcotic Prosecution Grant, and for Contra Costa that was defined as methamphetamine manufacturers. And so Contra Costa was basically the meth capital of the United States because of the presence of the Hells Angels in Contra Costa. And they controlled the meth trade because they controlled the meth cooks. And at that point in time, it was a very complex laboratory-style process involving phenyl-2-propanone and the round-bottom triple-neck glass and heating mantles, and it was complicated. And so this was prior to gang enhancements existing, so I used conspiracy law to prosecute the people involved in the meth labs. And at that point in time, I spent enough time in that prosecution to start seeing the next generation come up. And the gang membership tends to be multi-generational, and the drug use tends to be multi-generational. Then when I moved into the gang homicide unit, I was literally prosecuting by the beginning of 2014, the third generation of the same gang. And being out on search warrants and being in the communities, it just really struck home to me that we have to start changing the thought process of the kids. We have to give them an alternative to a gang lifestyle, and that lifestyle, it needs to have meaning and impact to turn them away from what they're seeing in their neighborhoods all the time. So I created a new unit in our office called the Community Violence Reduction Unit, and it's based on the federal violence reduction network model.
So now we're swinging the pendulum here to the other direction, right? And you're approaching this from a sort of a community-driven, maybe trickle-up influence, right, at the grassroots. Okay.
Absolutely, and we worked hand in hand with the DA FBI Safe Streets Task Force to do gang wire investigations. But also as part of that, I had a DA, all she did was go into the middle schools, since research shows that that age group is the most open to an alternate message. And all Laura did was go into the middle schools to bring an anti-gang, anti-drug, anti-violence message into the schools. And also we brought in all different kinds of resources so that the kids could learn that there were alternatives out there and things that were interesting to them, not just kind of the same old stuff, but to really give them an idea of careers out there for them, really just all kinds of different resources. So I was really excited about that because, until we stop the generations just cycling through the criminal justice system, it's just going to stay the same. And I really, really am so focused on changing outcomes for everyone. And then as part of her job assignment, she also helped the student absence review boards in the schools. And that's focused on truancy. And kind of stunned to find out that the truancy rate in some of the schools was 53%. And this was not high schoolers out cutting class. These were little kids, the K through 8s, not being brought to school by their parents. So, how can their outcomes ever improve if they're not even in school? So with the juvenile court judges, because the juvenile judges were seeing that the kids who weren't in school, that's when they became involved in committing crimes and got into the juvenile justice system. So they weren't they created with us this adult truancy court. They had no additional staff. They took it all on themselves. And then once we started the truancy court and had the parents in to talk about, what the issues were, then it became really apparent that there were social service issues with many of these families. For example, a 22-year-old single mom who has a 5-year-old starting kindergarten, a 3-year-old, and a 6-month-old, and she doesn't have a car. So she has to get all the kids up and dressed and on a public bus to get to kindergarten by 8 o'clock every morning. And if there's a wrench thrown into this somewhere, like she doesn't have enough money for the bus, or one of the kids is sick, then the whole thing just falls apart. So we worked with the Long's family, Long's Drugstore. They have a foundation, and they agreed to do $1 million grant to the truancy court to bring Lincoln Child Center into the truancy court to help address these social service issues. And then the county's behavioral mental health matched that to bring mental health services to the families. So it was really rewarding to start seeing these families heal and improve the outcome for the entire family, not just for our student.
Fantastic. So you're coming from the perspective of not just someone in law enforcement, but also a mother, right? Now, I read on your website bio that you raised a son, right, and as a single mother, right? And so clearly you come from a perspective that is very sort of safety, centric. There, having a son growing up in this community. So thank you for sharing that perspective with us. Now, going into the topic of, let's say, recidivism and school-to-prison pipeline, now clearly there's been something out there that's suggesting that grade 3, as you suggested, was it grade 3, right?
The research tends to show that when students are in middle school, they still their thought process is not so firmly cemented yet, that some of the high schoolers have already been impacted. And
now, coming back a little bit further, now I've heard something about grade 3 and how if, let's say, you are not doing well in grade 3, you're likely to fail in maybe the advanced topics like algebra, and if you mess up in algebra, you're likely a shoo-in for the correctional system, and the prison industry kind of models their projections based on how kids are doing in grade 3, because that ultimately is their pipeline. Is that so? Is that the case?
I'm not certain of that research, but I was just reminded of a homicide trial I was in that had crossover Northern Structure, Kumi African Nation gang enhancements, and I had a witness who was a former gang member testifying. Pretty notorious criminal in Contra Costa, to be frank. And he's on the witness stand, and this defendant was actually representing himself, but he passed him some documents to read. And this guy's in his 40s, and he sat for a long period of time and was just staring at the documents. And the defendant started asking him questions about the content of the documents, and he just sat there for a while, and then he said, I won't use the term he used right at the beginning, but he said, I can't read. So I talked with him afterwards about, how do you get to into your 40s and you can't read? And he's like, why do you think I'm where I am? He said, I couldn't behave in school. I have horrible ADD, and I was constantly a behavior problem, and teachers didn't want to deal with me. And so I just got, shuffled through the system and ended up in continuation school where no one ever knew I couldn't read. And that just struck me as no question, you are where you are now.
Interesting. The anecdotal stories and the evidence that we leave in society are uncanny. Now, going back into, let's say, the 3-point plan that you have shared on your website, okay, and that's about all I know about what that looks like. And so it sounds like what you're looking to do is to have some aspect of that kind of maybe drive the policy behind the behind Section 230 of the law that addresses how big tech is maybe held, liable for stuff, because you in essence want to have communications. You want to force big tech, I guess, to monitor communications and sort of like do sort of like sniffing for certain, or sentimenting, or something that basically is able to detect when these these looting, these organized looting sprees are about to occur. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? Like how does your role in the DA's office expect to drive impact at that level? Is it kind of purely advocacy, or is there something kind of more closely related?
I believe that, so as a county DA, I don't have the ability to pass laws. That's our legislature. But I believe that public awareness and then political awareness of what is actually organizing this crime. For example, the November 2021 looting of Nordstrom, there were 80 cars that all descended on Broadway Plaza in front of Nordstrom. They knew exactly where they were going. They all arrived at 8:45, right before the store closed. And then they all entered the store. They were in there for 2 minutes. They knew exactly what they came there to steal, and they were gone. So clearly this was organized, and if you have people coming from out of county, it's got to be happening on social media. And so we just all heard the tech people testifying in Washington, D.C., that they monitor the traffic on their websites. So once this monitoring is happening, and I'm not exactly sure how they do it, but they should have a responsibility to notify law enforcement in a timely fashion. They make money from people using their platforms, so there should be a responsibility that comes with that to frankly be good community partners and assist law enforcement and assist the citizens of our county.
Do you have any maybe reservations about what the impact of that sort of probing or monitoring could maybe bring to the community at large, and maybe how you expect those effects to be offset in any way? And in particular, let's say with folks that may not quite understand exactly, what is at stake and what the trade-offs are. How do you see these trade-offs?
Well, my understanding is that the tech companies are already monitoring all of our communications on their sites. So this is not imposing additional monitoring of traffic. It's what they're already doing. So they claim to be monitoring, for example, the use of their platforms for distributing child pornography and other really harmful matter, and also the bullying. They just testified that they monitor for bullying. And so if they're monitoring for all of that, they're monitoring everything.
So it's basically a fallacy that we have this privacy thing and that there's something to protect. I mean,
It appears to be.
Okay, so then what you're saying is that you simply want to kind of raise the bar on their accountability for these other areas, not just the porn stuff and all that, but also the the organized crime.
Yes.
Are there any ideas that you can contribute to this kind of let's say architecture for how this sort of sniffing would be done? What are some of the triggers that you think are driving these organized crime syndicates?
So I would not claim to have any idea how the tech companies monitor their traffic. I have no idea how that happens, but
Let's all meet at Nordstrom's kind of.
Yeah. So like if there's an algorithm that can that's triggered when Nordstrom is appearing in 20 or 200 communications, frankly, but if they can monitor bullying, I'm pretty sure they can monitor the organization that goes into the.
Okay, then we'll come back to that, or let them handle that. Okay, so now let's come back to the thing you said about the cell phone tower polling and such. And I know that that's even used right now in sort of in the case of like a poll fraud. There was like a big case where that was actually employed to show or prove that there were some kind of organized crime syndicates that were harvesting ballots and getting them to different poll boxes. They basically they scooped up all the cell phone tower data and were able to show that not just who the people were that were doing the ballot fraud, but who the organizers were. And so they sort of did this, and it was solely from that technology. And so we're talking now like 2020ish, or so when some of these like big looting events happened, right? And so clearly we would probably have cell phone data that was available, because I guess criminals get more savvy over time and might leave their cell phone at home, right? But you would imagine that back then we should have all that data. Is there anything that you could tell us about the progress that's been making in the background? Because I know sometimes we don't see what's working behind the scenes. We just kind of think that, well, nothing happened, and that also kind of sets a precedent to make the situation worse, sort of like broken window theory, right? So what has been going on regarding that cell phone tower thing? Anything that you can share?
Well, I worked with Walnut Creek PD in 2020 and actually filed charges on 7 people related to the looting in Walnut Creek, and then 2 in the looting incident at Best Buy in Pleasant Hill, and then 4 for looting of some cell phone stores in Pleasant Hill. So we did do they did some pretty impressive work. The
dynamic in the DA's office, all right? So I know that that's probably something that you've had to sort of, navigate, right? And so, from what I understand, what we've heard is clearly that we've got maybe like polar views, perhaps even on how to address some of these, societal issues. So can you talk to us about that? And maybe while we're at it here, we can talk a little bit about, so you have an overwhelming support of like Police Officers Association like backing, right? And there's also kind of like an overarching like issue or controversy that's being proposed controversy, right? That exists between Police Officer Association money going into law enforcement campaigns, or like I guess the prosecutor campaigns in particular, and how that creates a conflict of interest with regard to, let's say, a police officer needing to get prosecuted, but the Police Officers Association, who also backed the DA, or the prosecutor, also paying for the defense of the police officer. So this kind of conflict of interest. So is that a major issue here? Or can you talk to us about that dynamic there at the DA's office and some of the controversy behind this issue?
So frankly, the issues within the DA's office really have nothing to do with anyone's philosophy related to crime. The issues within the DA's office are created by the fact that there needs to be some integrity in the leadership, and the current DA actually plagiarized her application to be appointed DA, actually lifted information off the Alameda County District Attorney's website because she had no experience as a prosecutor, literally. So that was an issue from the very beginning. We uphold the law. We don't plagiarize and frankly commit perjury when you submit an application with.
So you make a big difference, a big contrast between a prosecutor and a judge, which the current DA has been in the position of. Is that correct?
Correct. She has never prosecuted a case. So
prosecutor would be like going after someone and going, dragging them through the whole court process to get them convicted.
Well, that's one component of it, that you're prosecuting someone, but you are also representing a victim's constitutional rights in the criminal justice system, that they are co-equal to a defendant's, So the fact that she has no experience dealing with victims' families through this whole process and doing an investigation in collaboration with law enforcement. She does not have those relationships, and she has never prepared a case for trial. She does not understand what the lawyers in her office do every single day, because she's never done it herself. And she is literally in an alliance with the San Francisco DA, Chesa Boudin, and the LA DA, George Gascon. They call themselves the Prosecutors Alliance, which I think is really kind of ironic because none of the three of them have ever prosecuted a case. Chesa Boudin is a criminal defense attorney. George Gascon was a lawyer when he was a police officer, but he has never done a trial himself. So that's a huge problem. You have to have experience to do any job. And that's what I've been doing for 37 years. And quite frankly, when I was a DA for 10 years, I didn't have the experience to be the district attorney. I've worked very hard to, create levels of experience and exposure, and I've managed units in the office. I've managed divisions of the office. I was in charge of our attorney training for 10 years. So I have a lot of additional experience, not just prosecuting, but the experience that you need to be the district attorney. And Ms. Becton has brought people into our office. She's hired people who have civil judgments against them for sexual harassment and retaliation. Hired and brought to our office without, I'm not sure why you would do that, but so there are a lot of issues in our office, and 57 attorneys have left in the last 4 years. We're only staffed for 104, and literally hundreds of years of experience have walked out of our office that we can't replace because we can't hire lateral attorneys. So when an attorney who is a statewide expert in cold case homicide left our office, she is replaced with someone who's fresh out of law school. We had the chief deputy that worked under Ms. Becton quit, said that she was literally sickened by the way Ms. Becton was treating homicide victims' families and by the offers that were being made on homicides, and she left. So it's not really a matter of, your approach to crime. It's really serious, deep-rooted issues in this current DA's administration.
If we kind of unpack the issues behind, let's say, the controversy or the accusations maybe that the police officers associations, which I guess supposedly they kind of represent the interests of the police officers, right? Is that generally how that goes, right? Is that they're advocates for the police officers and are their voice?
Yes, so the police officer associations, they represent the line officers, if you will, and then there are also in some agencies police management associations, and then there's a police chief. But with regard to police associations endorsing me and contributing, throughout my career, there have been police officers who were prosecuted in this county, and quite frankly, I've taught search warrants, which sound like just search warrants, but it's a much broader issue than that. It's the Fourth Amendment, and also writing search warrant affidavits and things like that. So I've taught throughout this state to thousands of police officers, and they very clearly know my stance on I expect police officers to act honorably and 100% follow the law, and if they don't, then they will be held accountable just like any other person. So to me, it's an honor to be endorsed and backed by the people that I've worked for 37 years. And it also, having people have access to my website has been pretty amazing to have. I'm now on my second generation of police officers, and to have like police officers I'm working with now, they're retired mothers and fathers writing comments on my website about how when they worked with me, their experience with me, and their belief that I am ethical and that I'll be an effective DA, it means the world to me.
So there have been police officers that have been prosecuted here. I read an article or maybe some articles that the Honorable Diana Becton has been the first one to prosecute in Contra Costa County.
That's not true. So Eric Bergen was a Pittsburgh police officer, and there were 2 other police officers involved in a murder of a store manager in Pittsburgh. They were also committing robberies, and those police officers went to prison. He is serving a life sentence for that. So absolutely, I remember being in court when I was in the courtroom when they brought those police officers into court to arraign them on murder charges.
So where does this leave those accusations or maybe theories that the police officers associations are going to somehow corrupt the prosecutor's office because of, the conflict of interest?
That is a convenient narrative that's being spun by the current DA. She literally, the DA is the chief law enforcement officer in the county, and there is not a single law enforcement agency that has endorsed her. And she said the other night that she would not take police association money. Well, none has been offered to her. So I don't know what to say when the DA is not endorsed by any of the law enforcement that she is supposed to be the head of in this county. So the fact that police associations have donated to my campaign will have absolutely no impact on how law enforcement involved fatal incidents are investigated. I volunteer my time. I'm on call 24 hours a day, 2 weeks rotating to go out on those to ensure that they're investigated properly and transparently, and that will continue. And it really speaks volumes that these are people who literally work with me every day, and they've endorsed me.
I had a high-ranking police officer share with me that the morale of the police officers is a bit kind of worn because of the effects that it has on them when they basically drag in the criminals and they get sort of, kicked right back out, or there are sort of some bars to, I guess, even arresting them to begin with. So is there something that you could tell us about that and maybe what you would hope to improve with your approach?
Yeah, I believe the police officers are really just kind of frankly demoralized right now that they'll go out and they'll successfully make an arrest and solve a crime and, hopefully start to right the wrong suffered by the crime victim just to have the current DA's office not file charges. For example, Danville PD, half of the felony cases that they bring in for filing are no complaint is filed. So it's they're absorbing the frustration of our citizens and crime victims about the fact that nothing is happening, and they're just as frustrated. They want to be able to do their jobs. They want to be able to keep our communities safe. I mean, that's the whole reason they went into law enforcement in the first place. So, yes, they are getting frustrated by the fact that, the DA's office is just not prosecuting the crime.
Awesome. So, can you tell us in summary here, what the core pillars of your campaign are? Just to kind of recap, and how people can get involved with your campaign or support you.
So, the core of my campaign is, frankly, we need to just start enforcing our laws to keep our communities safe, and then we really need to get to work and start addressing some of the issues that, quite frankly, just have gotten out of control. And we need to, for example, address the mental health issues. We've had no mental health services available for people. So now we only see it when it hits a crisis point and someone's life is being threatened, and then the police have to become involved in this very dangerous situation. We need to start getting people to mental health services before it's in the crisis mode. I mean, we're such a prosperous and civilized society. We should be helping the people who need it the most before it spirals out of control. We need to start CORE is the first line of communication with the homeless communities. It's very impressive work. We need to start as a society finding the unhoused, the homeless, the whichever term you feel comfortable using. This is such a complex issue, and we need so many social services involved to start to unravel that and produce like healthy outcomes for people. So I feel like we can do both. We can enforce our laws so people are safe, and then we can get to work on like really creating such better outcomes for everyone.
Fantastic. So there you guys have it, folks. The Contra Costa County Deputy District Attorney. How do folks get in touch with your campaign?
My campaign website is maryknox4da.com, and it's a number 4. And then my handle on Instagram is at maryknox4da, and we're posting every day out at campaign events. We're walking neighborhoods. Frankly, we had 60 volunteers out last weekend walking neighborhoods in 10 different cities. We were in San Pablo and Hercules and Pinole and Danville and Walnut Creek, and so we'll be out again this weekend. We'll be in a number of different communities, and so we'd love to have supporters out with us. It's really energizing to me. I've met so many fascinating people. I've had the opportunity to do, for example, I was on Radio Soul and I'll be on again this Saturday at 5, and got to meet the 23rd Street merchants in Richmond, and walked 23rd Street and met all the merchants with Rigo and Gonzalo, and just really heard some fascinating.
You know, Rigo and Gonzalo, that's major street cred there.
Yeah, they're awesome. And and just being out with them walking 23rd Street, it feels like there's just so much that could be done there. It could turn it into like a destination. There's some empty lots. We could make little parklets there. There's great wall space for